Welcome, everyone. Today we have Svali Speaks joining us. How are you, Svali?
Good. How are you, Gabby?
I'm so good. It is such an honor and a pleasure to have you joining us today. You are someone that I've been reading your blogs and your work for so many years, and I was just saying before we started today, your work is something that I use all the time with survivors, and there's so many brilliant topics that you've broken down for us to understand. So it's such a pleasure to be able to host you on and have you share some of your story. And we were going to talk about some topics that I think are really important in these times, about how demonics are used in programming, about the Illuminati structure, and just really start breaking down some of the programming for people. But for people that don't know who or haven't come across Svali as of yet, she's an incredible survivor who has been speaking out about, how she's been able to break through from her own programming and break free of cults for many, many years. And I know that the resources that you put out there with your fantastic blog, Svali Speaks, helps so many. And Svali's also written an incredible book called Breaking Free of Cult Programming. And to introduce today, I just wanted to read a little bit from of a description of that book, because I just think it's so on point to what we're all learning and starting to understand today about the Illuminati. So it says, in order to understand Illuminati cult programming, it is first necessary to understand a bit about the structure and the philosophy of the organization. The Illuminati are a group of people who follow a philosophy known as Illuminism or Enlightenment, and the Illuminati were named several hundred years ago, but trace their roots and history to the ancient mystery religions of Egypt, ancient Babylon, and even Mesopotamia. So, out of these ancient religions, which were practiced secretly over hundreds and hundreds of years, there arose esoteric groups which continued to practice the rites, the traditions, and enculturation brought in from these original groups. Over the centuries, these groups practiced openly in some countries and covertly in countries where Christianity or other religions opposed their practices. Some of the groups which came out of these ancient roots included the Order of the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, Baphometism, and Druidic cults. These groups were the forerunners or the roots of the modern day Illuminism. The original Illuministic leaders chose to take what they felt were the best practices of each root religion, combine them into principles, and then organize these into principles according to the specific guidelines. Modern day Illuminism is a philosophy funded by the wealthy, but practiced in all social strata. It is a philosophy whose tenets have spread across the world. It started with the German branch of Rosicrucians, spread to England, and then came to the United States with the first settlers. The Illuminati have three main branches: the Germanic branch, which oversees the others, the British branch, which handles the finances, and the French-Russian branch. All three branches are represented within the United States and Canada, as well as every country in the world. I just thought, wow, that's such a summary, I think, of like what many of us, I know for myself, are starting to uncover is, we've known about the cults and how they operate sometimes from personal experience for survivors. But I think we're just starting to really get a glimpse of, how far reaching this spiritual technology goes back into, times of Babylon and Egypt. And it's quite astonishing to just see how it's really been transferred down through generations and being this hidden, like described there, illuminism or hidden knowledge that's just been kept from the general public in order to enslave the masses. And I thought I would love to start with asking you, Svali, from your personal lived experience, because we sometimes, sort of wonder, what is this structure with the Illuminati? How does it fit in with the Jesuits and, the Knights Templar, etc.? From your lived experience, like how did you find those kind of groups mesh together, and what do you sort of see as the pyramid structure, and who's at the very top of that?
Okay. To answer that, basically, there are 12 great occultic societies, international societies around the world, is what I've remembered. And when I first got my memories, it was as being a member of the Illuminati. But then later in my healing journey, as I was remembering a ritual where there were 12 fathers for the Illuminati too, and that's because 12 is the number of governance in a lot of occultic groups. I know there's always 13 because Satan is the 13th, but at the same time, 12 is a governance for a lot of international groups as well. And so I saw the 12 fathers, but then I saw a Jesuit father behind each of them, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And that's when I started to get my memory of the Jesuits. And what I remembered is that I was a member of the Jesuit order, and I had infiltrated the Illuminati. So, in fact, several generationals, because the Jesuit, in the occultic hierarchy, the 12 societies each have their own like territories and areas of governance. Like I mentioned about the Illuminati, some of their areas, France, Russia, Germany, the US. And although they have outposts in other areas, the Templars have like a huge influence in France as well, and in French Canada, and also in parts of South America as well. There's other orders, like in Italy, Magnificat is very active. Opus Dei has its own cells around the world. That's another one of the 12. So there's the Rosicrucians are in a lot of different countries. And so each of these societies has their own regions that they've been allocated. And they sometimes work with one another. Like, let's say that I'm an Illuminati and I'm going into a Templar region of the world. Leadership normally, if I'm on a mission, you have to notify the leadership of the other group what you're doing normally. And then they give you permission to come into their area and do your work and then leave. They need to know when you're coming and going. But what I've remembered is that basically in the hierarchy, the Jesuit order is over all of them. And in fact, they have what they call the summer games in June of each year, or the Roman games, and a lot of the leadership of each of the groups will come at that time, the top leadership, and will swear and renew their fealty and loyalty to Rome at that time. But most of the people in the lower levels of the groups don't know about that. It's not something that's shared with everyone. And that's what I've remembered, is that the Jesuit order is at the top of the hierarchy, but they have to interact and work with the other groups as well. All the groups do to some degree in order to accomplish what they're trying to do.
Incredible. So for me to kind of make sure I'm understanding that correctly. So even though you, I guess, were born into a generational family that were Illuminati, the Jesuits were literally another group above that were almost infiltrating.
Yes.
Is that right?
Because the family I was born into, generational, had actually been infiltrating the Illuminati for the Jesuit order for generations.
Oh, incredible.
And in fact, they've infiltrated most of the occultic societies secretly.
Wow. So the same thing that's happening out in the known world with the Jesuits is really happening within the cultic groups as well.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you so much for explaining that.
And this is very hard to talk about, just so you know. It's one thing to write it on a piece of paper, another thing to actually be disclosing this publicly. Although I've written about it on my blog, but still it's this is high security stuff for me.
Absolutely. We thank you for your courage coming forward and for everything you do with sharing in your blog. And I understand it's as a survivor, we're programmed literally to, hold so many things as secret and silent, and, the threats around that. So I know it's so difficult to come forward and speak about these things. So please take your time. I would love just to ask you, to give us a little snapshot of, what it was like as a child, growing up within, an Illuminati family, or as we've sort of discussed there, even a Jesuit family, just so people can kind of get a view of, maybe how that's different to the other cultic groups, etc., and what you found there. And I know that you were actually, involved in being trafficked, through some really big institutions, even the Vatican at times. So these are really high level groups that we're talking about as well.
Wow, how many hours do you have for
I know.
Growing up? I mean, there's so much. I mean,
Yeah.
I was conceived in a genetics lab in Switzerland.
Wow.
At CERN. Then was raised in a Jesuit facility the first 3 years of my life. But at the same time, that I actually had a triple set as well as two other doubles of me. And we would take turns rotating. Once we were three, we were actually hosted in our Illuminati family. That's when I first came to, I had a hosting in France, in Germany, in Russia, and the US. And so I first came to those families when I was three.
Wow.
And by then, of course, I had a lot of presentation, they call it presentation programming in place. So I had programming to present in the United States, in France, in Germany, and in Russia. And each of those presenters thought that they were the only part of me. They had no knowledge that I had other parts hosting in the other countries. And because I had four doubles, we would take turns, like I would spend 3 weeks in America, and then I would leave, they'd switch out and put my twin there. And no one ever knew because we looked alike, and they never suspected that was going on. And then maybe a month later, another one. And so I would rotate between the presentations, but I was spending the majority of my time still in Rome at the facility there. And so my main allegiance was to Rome, but with the other doubles is we would switch out and do our roles within the Illuminati in the different presentations. So I might spend 2 weeks in America as a three weeks in America as a 3-year-old, and then go spend 2 weeks in Germany, go to Rome for 6 weeks. Meanwhile, my twin is going to France for 2 weeks. And then maybe my other double is going to Russia for 2 weeks too, just because the Illuminati will rotate people between their presentations. And then, start all the rotating between presentations. So my life was traveling between Rome and the various presentations I was going to and hosted at.
Wow, how incredible. It's mind-boggling to just think of, how organized the setup is when there's multiple, copies of
it's all, they had computers back then, even when I was an infant, and it's all tracked. The trainers, they had trainers, and others will schedule the children. They very carefully organize and plan the scheduling that way.
Just incredible. And
yeah.
Just to understand, that level of programming, and even as, like a young child, a 3 or a 4-year-old, you already had, such prominent programming that you could present in different countries, and, I guess it was that to kind of fit into the culture and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And to have a cover. And to infiltrate, because Illuminati, of course, the families do raise them. Their kids aren't raised in a facility. But also, my mother in America was Jesuit as well. So she helped to maintain the cover, if that makes sense. And as part of it. And my husband in France was Jesuit. So we were doing it together to maintain the cover. And so, and a lot of times, like the man that trained me in America for the Illuminati was Jesuit too. So he could cover for me at times or schedule so that it would work out too. So there was a lot of coordination that been going on for generations, several generations to make it work. Anyway.
This is what we hear, isn't it? It's such a long game that they play, that they're setting up these plans, over so many generations. There's so many networks involved internationally. And I think that, is often what people just, it just absolutely blows their minds when they begin learning about this, is just how organized these network structures are and how they all mesh in together behind the scenes. It's such a hidden world. I would love to ask, because I know that obviously through your training, you were, trained as a programmer within the Illuminati.
Yes.
Would you be able to share with us, some of, what you saw or your experiences there that you feel would be relevant for survivors to understand? So I think we're so grateful and so lucky to have someone like you speaking out, because everything that we can learn about, programming at this stage allows us to continue breaking through our own as well. So anything that you feel called for to share with survivors.
Well, I was also a high-level trainer in the Jesuit order as well. And so, and I've tried to use those skills as well in my own healing journey.
Amazing.
Wow, that's a very broad question. I'm trying to think of what would be most helpful.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that people often overlook in healing is the role of attachment, the role of bonding, because when a survivor is early on in their journey, what they tend to remember is these are the evil, bad people that hurt me and I hate them and they're wicked and I want to stay away from them. And what they don't realize is these awful, and yes, what they do is awful, but these are the people that were my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, my uncle, my cousin, my best friends. Everybody that I loved most on earth, the people I bonded to, are members of these groups. And so, in order to get out, what people don't realize is there is a deep attachment to these people. And so, in order to truly get free, it means breaking that attachment bond. And in most cases, having, if possible, some kind of support or a safe person of some kind that you can talk to or be friends with or can help support you through that, because it could be very difficult to break attachment without having someone you care about who's not a member of the group. That for me was a very difficult process. I mean, I tried 3 times to get out, and the first time I had insufficient attachment. I attached to the wrong person. The second time I did have a good attachment, but I had so much programming still that even though I had broken a lot of my own programming, in the end, it was my desire that my loved ones in the group not be hurt with the threats that eventually kind of got to me. And so that was the ongoing battle. Is I love my sister. I love my, in the Jesuit Safe triplets, I love my twin brother and sister. And this principle is for all groups. I didn't want to see them hurt, and they were threatening them.
Yeah.
And that was probably emotionally the most difficult part, the emotions of it. And the other thing I learned is programming doesn't work unless you agree with it. You can beat a person and torture them, but that's not going to get them to be programmed. What gets a person programmed is, I will agree to do this and to hold this inside and to keep it going, because either A, I want to survive, or B, I want the person that I believe that I love most on earth, that I believe I can't survive without, to survive. And that's basic, foundational. And that's going to sound probably pretty deep. That is, because at core level, that's what happens. The infant is bonded. These people know how to bond baby from the time you're an infant. They're holding you, they're rocking you, they're nursing you, they're giving you a bottle, they're singing songs to you. And that creates attachment in the infant. And they use and manipulate that attachment so that when you're older, your subconscious brain is not just thinking, I need to obey program to be safe, but if I want to be loved, I have to obey my programming. And that's the hard for me has been the hardest to work on and to work through, is that I can be loved without obeying my programming. There are people that will care about me even if I don't do what I was told to do. And that takes time and support and healing.
That is just brilliant. It, like you said, it's very deep. I think it's such a key part of us understanding, these deep bonds, and how, our love and our hearts are manipulated, with the programming. And just what you said towards the end there about, it having to be accepted by us in some way for the programming to work. I think that's such an important thing for us to grasp. I would love to ask you, Svali, I know you've written about in your blog and spoken about previously the programming that was involved with survivors heading towards the New World Order events, etc.
Yes.
And military takeover. And I thought that would be a really important thing just to touch on today, because those times seem to be looming around us, at present. So I would love to hear, what you see.
Well, one reason I am not posting quite as much on my blog lately is I feel like saying, read the newspaper or listen to the news. If you want to know what the Illuminati are doing, all you have to do is snap on the TV, it seems. It's so blatant now.
Yeah.
It's well, and in fact, in my original book and blog that I wrote in 2000 to 2002, I said that in the year 2020, that the Illuminati and others would start to stop being covert. That would be the turning point. I wrote that it's 23 years ago, that 2020 would be the turning point when they would no longer be as hidden and would become actually known. Is in 2020, because in 2000 I wrote they were already in control, but they were covert. But in 2020 they would start coming out and becoming more overt, and we're seeing that happen with some of the things that happened during COVID and other things. That was the turning point, as it were. And now a lot of the agendas are becoming overt. All you have to do is listen to the world. If you want to know what the New World Order is up to, the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum are all blatantly now, they put the agenda out there.
Yeah. It's not hidden anymore, is it? It's just, they're in the headlines.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I don't bother exposing, because they're exposing themselves now, honestly. And what could I add to what's already being in the headlines? But I think that there is an agenda for New World Order I believe that by 2030, if my memories are correct and if timelines haven't changed, it's going to be even more extremely out in the open. Wow. I believe that by then we may see the advent of a world leader. That's a timeline that I was aware of when I was, active. That world leader is alive and well, will be exposed in 2030, give or take, or will be introduced to the world. And not as a world leader probably at first, but he'll be very charismatic. He will not look like what people expect. He will be very sympathetic to the Jewish nation, and as well as other nations, and will be helping to solve some of the crises that nations are escalating towards now, including possibly a large war.
Mm-hmm.
I think things are going to get pretty intense for a while. I think we're seeing things leading up to that. But I also am a strong Christian, and my faith is what has given me hope. I do believe, though, too, that there is a God, a true God, and not the false one, who is in charge of our, and who will also be active and at work and helping people to get free. I think we're going to see a mass exodus from the occultic groups. We're already seeing it. Mm. I think it's starting with dozens and dozens, or we're going to see thousands of people leaving, because they're realizing this is the last chance before they take over. That's why survivors are trying to get out. That's why they're trying to break free. And I believe that because of my faith, I believe the true God can help them to get free. And my prayer has been for years that God would raise up people to support those who are trying to break free and be a support to them. That's why I did my blog, was to help support people, online a bit, or to help teach them some of the things that might be helpful. But we need caring, compassionate, empathetic, loving people too, to support what I believe will be thousands of survivors getting out.
Wow, I'm just having tingles. I so feel that that is God's plan as well, Svali, to remove as
Yeah.
many people as possible from the enemy's kingdom and weaken it that way. And, by survivors getting free, we're the ones that they've wasted, or they've put so much time and energy and money into programming for various roles coming up. I think, by survivors getting free, it's a way that we can really shake the enemy's kingdom, and God is leading us there. So,
Oh yeah. And survivors are getting free. I know survivors who are getting free. I've seen survivors leave, and it's exciting to see, because no matter how powerful or strong or scary that the occult tries to make their kingdom, there is a kingdom that is greater. And even though the New World Order is going to be making its play, I love, and I believe it's in Isaiah where it says, the government will be on his shoulders and the increase of his kingdom will be forever. And that's talking about Jesus. It's not talking about the leader of the New World Order.
exactly.
So, yeah, so I know who's going to win, and that helps me not be afraid when I see what's going on in the world around me. Satan's trying his hardest, but he can't win.
So true. We know who wins in the end. We've just got to get everyone free before then. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing your experiences there.
Yeah.
I would love
Yeah.
to ask you as well, through your experience of, working as a programmer and seeing people programs. One thing that survivors, are really becoming aware of is the use of demonic entities, energies during programming. I know that can be a really challenging thing for survivors to break through. And it can also be, an incredible opportunity for survivors to get free, because these influences really pin in a lot of the programming. And I've seen incredible results with survivors I've been working with, as they remove these energies, entities,
Yes.
how quickly their whole programming comes undone and they're able to move forward. And I definitely know that was the case for me. And, when I was being targeted, all of that, harassment actually brought up, my energy attachments, and I had to deal with them before I even completely understood that I was a survivor. I had little things coming up, sure, but my story is a little bit different to most people, because they'll often work on trying to break down a lot of the other programming and push all the demonic stuff, push all, the things that they see to the very last. They're like, I'm not going there. And I would say, it is intense facing those things, but I had to face them very early to survive and get out. But as that made me move forward, deprogramming so much easier without those influences as they come up. So from from your experience of being a survivor and deprogram, but also seeing the programming going in, is there anything that you could share that might assist survivors in kind of tackling this area of energetic and spiritual warfare that's used during the mind control programming?
Sure. And this is based on what I saw. When we did programming, we would do rituals before and after a programming session. And we would have the individual being programmed. This was in my group. And by the way, so if a survivor has memories different than I'm, that's okay too, because different groups do it differently. So I would describe how the group I was in does it. So if someone has memories different than mine, it means we can both be right. I want to emphasize that. So, but in the group that I was in, we would do a ritual beforehand, and once a person was old enough, get them to agree to allow the demonic entity to help them through the programming session. That, like, a child would believe, I need this demon to help me survive this programming session, or to take my pain away, or to lock the memory so I can't remember it, because if I remember, then something terrible will happen to someone I love. So before there'd be a ritual, and often afterwards there'd be a ritual to seal as well. And so what the programmers found is that programming on its own, if it's not reinforced, will often degrade over time. If you go a year without being programmed as a young child, the programming will start degrading. But if you seal it with the demonic and entity, the whole programming actually holds in place much longer. And in fact, it can be very difficult to rid of, especially if the individual program believes, I need that demon to help me cope with what happened. That's one of the lies people are told. Or I need that, you call them spiritual, I guess, that I need that spiritual entity or whatever to help me forget. Or I need a spirit of illusion to help me feel happy. I was just traumatized. So as long as a person believes they need that, then that entity will often stay. Once it's addressed directly, working through a lot of difficult emotions and brain states and stuff like that, then the entity will leave. It has nothing left to hang on to. So for me, it was a combination of actually actively renouncing the spiritual activities I was involved in, getting rid of the entity, but also healing the trauma, working through the feelings, journaling, talking to people, say, oh my gosh, this happened, and I don't, and I'd be crying and crying, or heartbroken as the feelings came up with the traumas. But then I chose to go through that process because I didn't want these entities to have something to keep hanging on to. And over time, it got better and better. And yes, I've been through deliverance, but I personally do not believe that deliverance without trauma informed healing works. I think that you need both hand in hand. I've seen people go through deliverance, and then 10 years down the road, they go, oh, you know what? I had all this trauma and it never really resolved. It just went underground. So I think people need both.
That's
For
incredible.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's an incredible description of just, how we have to be active in, closing the doors to these things on so many levels, like,
Mhm.
in our physical lives, in our spiritual lives, and just really like cutting these energies off, basically.
Oh yeah, because they're nasty, and their intent is to destroy.
Yeah.
And yet, thank goodness, there is a loving God who created the universe, so whose intent is to heal and to love us and to bring us back from these things. So,
So true.
and yeah, I mean, I remember traveling dimensions, as part of my training, because the Jesuits and the Illuminati do a lot of spiritual training. Oh, some of the nasty stuff that they can do is unreal. I was an oracle to a major Illuminati house for a year when I was 19, and that was, you want to talk about nasty. Just did not enjoy that at all, but it was part of what I did at the time. But I've but the lives of oracles are so awful too. Some of them,
Would you be able,
and
would you be able to describe, Svali, like what the role of an oracle is? Because I have a very limited understanding, and I kind of see it as, almost like a psychic role for, the cults where people are going to consult, but you'd probably be able to describe
well,
that better than me.
well, I think I'll describe it first in Rome. In Rome, there's a place where they have 9 oracles, and they're chained to pillars. And these girls are not allowed to leave. And whenever a person enters into this area, these girls will cry out and scream and start prophesying. And it makes it very uncomfortable to walk past them, make the hair on the back of your head raise. But that's the worst example. Those are the oracles that are like tied to them from various occultic groups, and that's their full-time job. And those poor girls usually don't last very long. They usually only live for a year because it's such or two. But then the large occultic families will rent out oracles too. And that oracle will come and live in the house, and that individual will be an oracle to the father, like the French father would have an oracle that stays at his house. And when they have major questions and things, they will go to the oracle and ask. And then her job then is to be a channel for the entity that tells them what to do, that gives them guidance or gives them a prophecy of what would happen. Like they might ask a question like, who's my greatest enemy? And the oracle will consult and say, it's so and so. What is he planning to do? And the oracle will tell them. And they have to be 100% accurate. If they're not, they're killed, So they want only the oracles that are very accurate. And I remember when I was at Oracle as an older teenager in this one house of the Illuminati in Europe, one of the hardest things I went through is the son came to me and said, when is my father going to die? And I remember looking at him and saying, you cannot ask me that, because the day I give you that answer, your father will kill me. So I said, he knows the answer, go to him and ask him, you know? But it's because the son couldn't wait for his father to die, and he wanted me to tell him. And I knew that would be foolish, even as a, teenage. Well, I was 19. I knew that would be foolish to do because it would be reported to his father. But so those are some of the things that they do. But that was just for a year in that house. I wasn't chained or anything. I was allowed to go around. There's a lot more freedom, and the oracle's held in honor. Of course, she has to have relations with the head of the house and all that as part of her job. And so basically, that was one job I did too, as well as being a trainer. I was given a year off from my training duties to do that.
Not much of a year off, mind you. It's just
No,
mind-boggling.
no, and
Roles
I
that
mean, all right, trigger warning. I'm gonna be a little crude, but I was discussing this with a friend. I said it seemed like all he wanted was my two orifices working for him, if you know what I mean. My mouth speaking, and I won't go into the other. I know that's crude, but that's what
it's slavery, and I think that's what we have to
it was. Slavery.
It's modern day slavery that
It is.
drag noses, like it's so horrific.
Yeah,
Oh,
but that's a mentality in these groups.
yeah, that they have the right to have that power over someone. And
Oh yeah.
I would love to ask you, because of your knowledge of that role, and also the programming and the fact that you've been able to heal so wonderfully, to be able to speak out and do what you do to assist other survivors. There's so many survivors working through at the moment. What is my gifts from God? And, what is things that the cult have put into me? What is attached to demonics, etc. And I know one thing that comes up a lot is people's psychic abilities, because we know that demons are attached through that a lot of the time through sort of children as a child, to enhance our connection with the occult world, etc. I would love to hear what you would like to share with survivors about your journey of releasing these things that have been put into you through your own programming, and finding your way forward with that sort of thing around the gifts.
Well, psychic ability, they called it theta, because often the person, at least in the group, the order, the theta is a state where a person is very susceptible to spiritual entities and to be in contact with it. And so, for example, one ability that theta will give you, and it's because an enhancement from the spiritual entities, is the ability to run incredibly fast, supernaturally fast, or to be able to run up the side of a wall in a building, which would not be normally able to have almost superhuman, not totally superhuman, but much enhanced strength and things like that. Another example of psychic, though, would be to travel the dimensions and to report back to the people what you saw when you're traveling the dimensions. And that could be a whole other hour talk about that. Another psychic ability is psychic assassination, and people are trained in that, and that's terrible, but that's just what they do. The ability to do that in the spirit realm. And another ability is the ability to remotely view, to go to a building and see things and read a document and read it out to the person on the other end. Because you're viewing it, you can go through files, you can do all kinds of stuff. I know it sounds incredible, but it really does happen. People do those things. Another, I don't know, there's just all kinds of things like that that people do. And it's sad because, again, it's a type of slavery, because that person has to be loaded down with so much demonic, so much trauma to be able to do those things. And it's really, and it creates a cost in people too when they do those things, spiritually and physically. When people are traveling, I've actually seen people not come back. And that was very difficult when I was, involved in things like that. There's just a lot of things to psychic abilities, quote unquote. All I know is they're not worth the cost. I don't care what information is gained, it's never worth the cost. And I had to also talk to the parts that were involved in that, get to know them, have them give up their demonic or their spiritual entity attachments, and to see that they could stop doing their jobs. I've seen people shapeshift into different shapes. Part of the mage training in the Jesuit order is to shapeshift into a bird shape. And they as a raven or another bird, and as wolves. And I've seen there are generational groups that use their generational bloodline ability combined with huge demonic attachments who can shapeshift into werewolves. Another spiritual ability is what's called Omega. And what that is the ability to carry spiritual for one another. So a team can come in together of 6 or 7, and Omega team, and carry spiritual things, so that one, for instance, they have been working at creating half demonic, half human entities. I know this would stretch believability for a lot of people. But this is my memory, and some of the labs. But that takes a huge cost spiritually and physically on the person. So they'll have Omega teams surround the mother, carrying that half, what I believe and still do, was half human entity that would have killed her or from the inside out, unless others had helped to carry some of that for her.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so now I'm discussing stuff that's probably sounds out there, but I actually saw them.
No, not at all. We've had a few survivors speak about the Nephilim and the breeding programs, and we had Amanda
Really?
join
Okay.
us a few weeks ago. So thank you so much for sharing, because I think this is something that so many survivors are just beginning to realize, and remember their own experiences in, and just being able to hear it from someone that has healed and, has worked through what comes from demonics and what is coming from God, within us. I think it's just, it's so important to hear. And, thank you for, sharing about the costs that you found with, all of this occult and psychic work, because that's, through my experience of helping survivors heal and prepare to share their stories, etc. That is a big part of it, is just, renouncing the things that we've been taught are our gifts, and that, perhaps have comforted us, during hard times, etc., and realizing that they aren't of God, they aren't of goodness, they're not even human, and just breaking free from those. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I'm just so grateful to have had you here today, and being able to hear just a little snapshot of your story and some of your incredible work. And as we finish up, I would just love for you to share where people can find your blog, and I'll pop those details in the video description so people can check out some of Svali's years and years of work, breaking down really important topics for survivors, and anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to share with us, our community.
Okay. Well, my blog is swalispeaksagain.wordpress.com. So that's where people I have articles. I tried to organize them according to topic. And I also wrote an entire book that's on the blog, 2 different chapters on the Jesuit order and some of the things I've remembered them, including their involvement in trafficking, like infant and child trafficking and other things. That's the main way. And my contact, I do have a email there or a contact page that people can contact me through as well. Because I get a lot of questions, it can take me a while to get back to people to respond. I can't answer every question for everyone though, too, because a lot of times people say, I have this, do you think this is this type of programming? And I can't do that through my blog though, or my email. And so the reason why is because everyone is unique. Different groups do things differently. I'm describing how the Illuminati and the Jesuits do things, but other groups do things so differently. Everyone is unique, that without knowing someone, I cannot say, oh, actually, I can never tell someone this is what you have. They have to know and talk and get to know their parts and themselves, or they'll say, I have this going on. Do you think I'm in the cult? I can't answer that either, because for each, I'm just saying this because I get this almost daily emails like that. Only that person can answer that question for themselves. But I always encourage people to try to find a safe person they can talk to, either a therapist or a support person, or someone, if they can find someone that they can share their concerns, their questions, their worries with. Because a real person who develops a relationship can be so much more helpful. That's even much more helpful. I actually wrote the Svali Speaks Again for therapists to help them understand that when survivors are reporting this stuff, it actually happens. This is real stuff. Yeah.
And I think that's been an ongoing thing for decades, hasn't it? Just getting the therapist to understand that this is true, and they need to treat it like trauma rather than just thinking it's someone in a psychosis. So thank you for the incredible resources that you have there for survivors. And if you haven't already checked it out, I would definitely recommend heading over to Svali's blog. And it is very, very well organized. It's got lots and lots of different headers, so you can scan through and see what's relevant. And even if your programming isn't necessarily just Jesuit or Illuminati, there's many, many similarities across the group. So I think it's such a great starting point for people to just find out more, and then hopefully you can journal and spend some time, like Svali said, speaking to your parts and just breaking down perhaps what happened for yourself. And I love your blog, Svali, because it empowers people to do the work themselves, and that they can really deprogram, perhaps just with a trusted person that they can speak to as well. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful you joining us, and we so appreciate everything that you do, speaking out and raising awareness, as well as sharing your incredible life experience, which I know is very difficult for survivors to do, especially of these kind of high level cults. So we can all learn and deprogram together and bring everyone back to God's kingdom.
Yes, because that's where the real healing and I think the strength to heal comes from too. Yeah. Thank you.
Bless you, Svali. Thank you so much.
Oh, bless you, Gabbi.